What's going on, y'all? It's another episode of Cultivation Cuffee. Cultivation. Another episode of Cuffee Cultivation. I'm out here in the garden right now, enjoying life, looking at the wonders of God. Let me show you real quick. There you go. You know what I mean? Something light. But, last time we did a video on YouTube, an official one, we were just putting things in the garden. Like, we was getting the soil. All that was happening. Oh yeah, fish pepper. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's getting dumb. We planted everything way too close to each other, but guess what? It's growing. So this is looking. I'm real hyped about these, yo. These right here. Is that one ready? That one might be ready. Snap, crackle, pop. Blue cream berry cherry tomatoes. Delicious. Oh. You know what I'm saying? But we took a trip to CompostRVA, a really cool place with a really cool idea. What they do is they go to different restaurants, things of that nature, restaurants, grocery stores, businesses, and they collect all the food scraps. They compost them down, make compost for the environment, for the world, you know what I'm saying? But it's a great service. They provide the buckets. They go to the restaurants, they provide the buckets. They pick up the buckets, and they bring new buckets. All you gotta do is fill up with the stuff you could throw away anyway. And they take care of it, and they make life with it. They're partnering up with a lot of different restaurants right now in Richmond. The information will be in the description. Hit them up. If you're interested in that, you have a business that you would like to give them your food scraps, or what's going on out here? What's going on? Or you want to buy some compost like I did, and you see the results. It's pretty good. P.S. Before, I'm sorry, talking a whole lot. My backyard is dumb with mosquitoes and bitey things. So if any of y'all know some type of natural way to get rid of mosquitoes out your backyard, then help us out. Other than that, that's it. Live with the homie Bruno, founder, creator, owner of CompostRVA. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, thanks. How you doing?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I got a couple of questions for you real quick. First of all, how did you even get into composting, gardening, things like that?
Composting started back when I was working in the restaurant business, coming out of college. And we basically had one summer where trash wasn't getting picked up for some reason. And I decided to figure out another way to work with it. Heard about composting and started doing it out of my parents' backyard at that time. Took everything and anything and found out how to work with it. And after a couple of years, it got to the point where if I wasn't working that night, the people at the restaurant would be like, "Oh, we got your compost ready. We got all your stuff set aside." And and it kept going from there.
Okay. All right. What made you even want to start something like this? Because this is, I was talking to my girl about it after I came, and I was like, this is just a unique idea to have. So what made you even come up with this?
I mean, it was a lot of, so when I first did it, it was very therapeutic at the time. I just lost my grandfather, and it was rehabilitative, working with the dead stuff and making it back into something living. And only years later, I was finding out about different bacteria that exist in the compost. One in particular, it's a variant of Actinomycetes, that the bacteria actually makes you calmer, lowers your cortisol levels. So it was one of those things where it was just what seemed like taking out stress and working with the earth and stuff like that was actually it also working back with me and making me a calmer person. And it really clicked as far as how to work this into the community aspect, because that was one of the things when I was going to school. that I wanted to do some sort of community work in some sort, doing some sort of nonprofit. Originally trying to do education through like journalism, and then I kind of saw the avenue of using gardening and the vocabulary of gardening and the mathematics and the biology and all the science, and finding a way to like make it palatable for not just kids but adults, young adults, everybody, and just kind of make it a part of life kind of deal.
All right, cool. What advice would you give to someone who would be looking to get into composting themselves? Like, how would you start a pile and things like that?
Start with whatever you got. Be patient, because you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
I've been doing this now for 7 years. No, I take that back. 12 years, and I still have days that like it doesn't work right. So basically, it's just you got to start. I always suggest to start small with like coffee grounds or tea leaves, stuff like that. Stuff that if it goes bad, it doesn't get too funky. It can still get moldy and stuff, but it's not gonna call the cops kind of deal. So which is a thing with composting too. If it gets too funky, your neighbors will let you know. But just like start really cool about it. Small pile. Vermicomposting is a good one. Working with the worms. Expect that the worms are going to die sooner or later, but even if they do, don't dump out the whole bin, because that's what a lot of people do. The pods of the worms, the cocoons that are in there, can stay viable upwards of a year depending on the species.
Okay.
And then they'll come back. It's all just like a learning process. So like I recommend people have like a journal on hand, a video, whatever, just something so that like if you mess up, you make a note about it, and then you learn from it, and you apply that method, and you're basically doing the scientific method outside of class.
Okay. How long have y'all been in business back here?
We've been here for a couple years now, and in business since 2013, originally working specifically with school kids, and showing kids how to do composting, and then also giving them compost bins to work with so that they could actually apply the knowledge.
That's cool.
And learn from it. Thank you. And then from there, it turned into word of mouth, working with businesses like King of Pops, and then spreading out to other businesses and restaurants, and now moving into residential work as well.
Okay. Have you had any like difficulty like working with anybody? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, just what am I looking for? Just basically like you go up there, offer them your services, and like for whatever reason they're just against it. Like,
I can be convincing. I mean, it's one of those things where like if folks really aren't into it, then they're not into it. But with every interaction I have with folks, I try to make it at least where like they learn a little something. And even if they're like completely against the idea of composting or just working with soil and stuff like that, just anything green and stuff like that, I've found that like if you can work in just the tiniest little fact with people like that, it builds. Just like with the compost, how you're building bacteria into a colony, into a whole biodiversity of things. I found that one of the most effective ways to getting folks that don't dig what you're doing is just find that story, find that comparison of like what you're doing and how that applies to them. Because that's basically what I base my teaching classes on, is what's referred to as the Paulo Freire method, where you go in the pedagogy of the oppressed, where you're making everything applicable to the person and not to the system. So I could teach somebody something all day long, and if it doesn't apply to their life, to their livelihood, to their business, to their what interest, then they're not going to care. Whereas if I find out about the person, and if I make it in a way that's palatable to them, then they can work that into their own system, and then they can find why it's important to them. And it might not be a way that I was thinking about, but if I can make those dots connect for them, then that's what it's all about.
That's awesome.
don't currently.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've looked at is just as far as like um, one, regulations as far as like shipping, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I'm really focusing more on like getting your compost as fresh as possible and like really treating it as a living thing, because it's everything from like, you know, how you know how big your bubbles are when you're making compost tea. If you make them too small, it can break the fungal roots that are within the mycelial roots. To, you know, that's just one example of how sensitive and delicate that life is within the composting system. So even with like the finished compost, I really try to make it as fresh as possible and applicable also to like the person's gardening needs, so that like when you're getting it, it's getting fed to that soil, it's getting fed to that plant right away. So I mean, that's one of the things. I would much rather set up systems remotely, like satellite systems in other cities and other states, or even show people how to do their own thing and like get them to do it rather than bring it over to it, because that way too, like they can find out their local resources, they can find out their local carbon sources, and they can work it so it's as unique to their environment as it is the stuff that we create here within Virginia.
What is there anything particular about this location that made y'all choose to be right here? Was it convenience, or was it just?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the person that approached me about it, Arthur, he was actually attending one of my classes through the Master Gardener program, and you know, one of the things I always emphasize when I'm teaching adults is all these spaces that are around Richmond and around cities in general that don't get utilized. And wouldn't it be great if they got turned into a tiny composting area or a tiny urban garden, or just anything that would be productive to the community? And you know, and found out about this space here, and you know, found out there's, you know, right around the community and stuff like that. And like, you know, especially when we first opened up, we had like a community garden built up and had folks come in from the community to like help with building stuff, planting stuff, doing all that good stuff. And yeah, I mean, that was the thing, is like, as much as it's a case of like finding a, you know, a rentable big lot that has nothing going on for it, having that kind of community around is really unique, and I think is beneficial to the process.
And see, that's what I really think is really dope about this whole, because it doesn't seem like this is like a money-making scheme. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like y'all are in it for the money. Y'all are more in it for helping out people and the passion of it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. Yeah, and I appreciate it. And that's one of the things, is that like there's ways to make it on a larger scale, and I mean, I definitely want to get it larger at some point. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things where making the product really good from the get-go and seeing the life coming out of it, and seeing the growth that comes out of it, there's a lot of human contact that comes into that, as opposed to making something very large and industrial scale that can't sustain that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, like you see all these different composting programs around the country where you have people from all different demographics, all different socioeconomic backgrounds working together in different ways that, like, you know, there's sweat and blood put into that stuff, and you can see the product is much different than the stuff they usually get in the store. That's like, it may be big and bulky and expensive, but like, you know, I'm focused more on the quality of the outcome than the bulk of it.
Okay.
And just focusing on like what a really good vegetable looks like. It has, you know, not just nutrients in it, but has bacterial life, and it has things to protect it long term, rather than, oh, it can grow really large. You know, something that, like, when that plant starts to have an issue, the bacteria in there work their way in, the fungi work their way in.
Okay. See, like that type of stuff of gardening kind of almost, not that I don't want to get super religious about it, but like it almost solidified the fact that there is a God, just because everything works with each other. Like the soil, the worms, it's just the soil food web. Just
Yeah.
everything just working together all the time.
Oh, I mean, like case in point was not this current corn, but I had corn growing here last year, and the corn was going kind of slow, and I started noticing that there was stuff growing on it, and I thought maybe something was wrong with it, and I found out that what it was is this particular type of fungus that attaches itself to corn seed, and if the temperature, humidity, and everything is just right, this fungus sprouts, and what it does is it starts spreading out throughout the corn, and then basically looks for insects that go onto the corn, which were flies in this case, and the fungus was basically capturing the flies, and it was eating them. So it was working symbiotically with the corn itself. So all these flies that would be going all over and doing all this stuff were basically becoming lunch for this fungus, and this fungus is connecting itself to the root system and doing all these other great things. So,
working hand in hand.
yeah, I mean,
that's crazy.
It's all like, when you start looking close enough, there's so much connectivity within the soil and outside the soil. The same way that we have bacteria that control and feed us and help our stomachs and help our minds and our bodies, the soil food web spans even farther than just the soil. It's the bacteria around the plant itself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, you want to give us a quick tour or show us around a little bit? All right.
So right here we have a large windrow, and it has carbon material that comes from coconut coir, leaves from a local arborist. The bags over here are actually kombucha tea bags that we found out that after the kombucha process, we throw the tea bags into the compost, and it seems that the bacteria as well as the broken down material of the tea, the worms go crazy for. Then we have some volunteer plants from a microgreen.
Yeah, this is all new. Won't none of this here.
Yeah, the corn is specifically from the microgreens, and then the squash seems to be a volunteer from some other plants a while ago. And I mean, on the one end, it's sucking nutrients from the compost pile, but on the other end, it's making vegetables that we can share with the community and stuff like that. Clients come by and they want to try something different, boom, there you go. I mean, just the same way that you were asking, when you have people who don't want to be about it, if they can see basically the proof is in the pudding kind of thing, then they're like, oh, this actually tastes really good. Like a fresh strawberry versus the store-bought one that, came from another country or another continent and doesn't have that same flavor profile. So this one's a larger compost windrow. And then over here we have a longer one. And this has everything from bones, meat, compostable plates, cutlery. Unfortunately, there are the occasional straws that end up into the pile as well, and that's one of the things that we end up sifting out.
Okay.
And it's work, but you've seen what it looks like when it's done.
Yes, sir.
And then over here we have some older piles that have been getting excavated into. This one here in particular is what you see left pretty much is like eggshells and some bones and stuff like that. And the bones especially are one of those things that we like to use into the compost because they provide lots of calcium and potassium.
Okay.
And we also have oyster shells get broken up into this as well.
Okay. So it's basically almost like using bone meal and oyster meal kind
totally.
of.
Yeah, all right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I figure the same way that you had indigenous people using fish into the gardening system is the same way with using the bones and all this other stuff where you let it break down slow enough and something will break it down. I mean, even as far as the bones go, the bones will break down, and then once all that marrow and everything is broken out from the inside, I mean, that even refers back to religious script where you have the horn packed with manure and then it gets buried into the ground. I mean, basically what you have there is you have a growing medium, and then you have the compostable material, the manure, that has all the bacteria from the composting process, and in particular that hotter bacteria from the manure, that all gets jammed into there, and then it basically goes crazy inside of there. I mean, it's effectively like almost like a biochar system.
Okay.
So the same thing goes here for the bones, where you have all these porous little spaces, things go in there to eat, and then they also magnify and grow, or multiply and grow. And then off in the corner there, I can show you the mushroom pile that this is basically blue oyster mushrooms and shiitake mushrooms that this is the growing medium that they were initially grown inside bags. They all get stripped out of that, broken down into here, and then this ends up being the fungal component that we add into our compost, and that just helps with extracting nutrients from the ground. It's a really good medium as well, and helps break down that carbon material even quicker than what we were traditionally doing with just chopping into it and letting the worms take care of it. And then every once in a while you get some mushroom growth out of it as well, which is a cool thing.
Okay. What would be what's the difference between mushroom compost and regular, I guess, compost?
So if you're going with just completely straight up mushroom compost, basically what you're getting out of there is you're going to get something that's going to be really heavy in mycelial root structure.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what's going to end up happening is with that compost in particular, and we're talking stuff that's just had mushrooms in there, you're going to have lots and lots of the mycelial or mycorrhizal connection from the root structure of the mushroom. So that means that when that's being used as your compost, you're going to have connectivity going from the soil to your plant that you're growing, and it's basically talking about that soil food web, but even wider, because it's basically everything that's coming out of that compost is looking to suck nutrients out of the soil and how to basically barter with other things. So it's going to be this mushroom working on minerals, rock deposits that it finds in the ground, working on dead plant matter that it finds in the ground, working on manure that it finds on the ground, working on all these different things, and making that connection to your plants, to a tree, to whatever it can exchange with.
Okay.
Whereas with a regular compost that will probably have vermicompost as well as bacterial, is still going to have that structure, but especially if you're working with a vermicompost, you're going to have a particular type of bacteria indigenous to the digestive tract of the worms that causes really rapid growth. And then with the bacterial compost, you're going to have really good structure that's going to be basically working as an herbicide or pesticide depending on the system, in making sure that once your plant is in the ground and growing, it's going to have that fallback mechanism. So if something starts to attack it, hopefully that bacteria will counterattack it. Whereas the fungi even have their own way of attacking things in the soil, where there's even shots you can find online of the root structure, the mycelia, actually drilling onto, I believe, nematodes as well as minerals.
Okay.
You can actually see these little porous spots that the fungus has been sucking out.
That's cool. That's cool as hell. Look at that. So when you give people the compost, you give them a mixture of this or is it one or the other?
It depends. Well, so typically I haven't done the fungus straight up. Usually what I've done is the fungus is the base to any of the compost piles.
Okay.
And the reason for that is so that, just like I was talking about that connection that the mycelia make, I would try to put it at the very least on the bottom of each of the piles, so that way they're already working to make that connection and that inter-exchange, and then hopefully they'll spread upward. And that's happened too, where we'll be going through the windrows and random mushroom patches will come up through there. So the whole idea is that I want as biodiverse a product for you as possible, so that you're getting that connection from the fungus, you're getting that bacteria from the stomach of the worm, you're getting the tillage that the worm is creating in the compost and in the soil. You're getting the benefit of the bacteria in the soil, because that way the more stuff you have going on in that soil, the harder it's going to be for some monocrop attacking bug to basically go, a bacteria to go at your plant, a fungus to go at your plant and be like, oh, okay, you've got nothing going on to protect your soil, I'm going to go ahead and infiltrate. Whereas if you have all these different things competing and harmonizing and working together, then they basically just, it's like a Red Rover bond that they're like, all right, you're not playing with us, like, you can stay away.
Before I let you go, you want to give people a way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach us at CompostRVA.com, as well as CompostRVA on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we're working towards expanding towards commercial as well as residential. And so basically, we try to make composting as easily and accessible for everybody as possible. So if you want to rock with it in your backyard, we'll show you how to do that. And if you want somebody to take it and take care of it and you don't have to worry about it and also get compost back in the end, we'll take care of that for you as well.
I appreciate it, man. Before you go, can you tell the people, please tell them grow something?
Grow something.